Hello everyone, welcome to the Wednesday Wire. This week we're building a little bit of a bigger circuit here, as you can see. It's a little bit more complicated, so I'll go ahead and let you know up front. This video is going to have to be split into two parts just to kind of cover everything that I want to go through about how this system works. One of my goals with this series is to make sure that it's accessible to anybody and anybody has the ability to go through this and pick this up without any trouble. So let's jump right into it here and waste no time. So this system is built to basically randomize a group of 8 players into 2 separate teams of equal size, so 4v4. Now, in Terraria, making random number generation is fairly simple, or at least dealing with probabilities is fairly simple, because you can use an AND gate with a basically one lamp that's on and one lamp that's off, and then you can put the faulty logic lamp on top of that. And when you put a wire to the faulty lamp, there's a 50-50 shot of a signal being sent from the AND gate. So this is a good way to simply choose between one outcome or another, given that it handles the probability and lets you choose what the likelihood of each is. So the problem there with just using something this simple is with 8 players, you're not guaranteed, and it's actually almost unlikely for you to get 2 even teams of 4 players each. So we had to build a little bit of a bigger and more complicated system to handle that, because it is a fairly challenging problem to solve. Now, like with all of my previous builds, it's kind of divided up in a way that I think makes sense. So hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to understand here. There's 3 primary components to it, I guess maybe 4, depending on how you look at this right side, but we'll start at the left, and you can see there's 2 or I guess 4 sets of little like D-shaped kind of deals here. So that's going to be the first part that we look at. That's called the accumulators. This circuit inside of here, I kind of think of like the brains of the operation. It's what actually handles the random assignment of one team or another. So we'll go into a little bit of detail here in this video to talk about how this actually works. And then all of this over here on the left is basically what I would consider just memory. It essentially remembers the choices that the CPU makes for each of the players. So this circuit on its own will only choose for one player. I've got it wired up to loop, and part of that actually isn't working. So that, there's a couple things that I haven't tied up in this system. So I'm actually going to be running it manually, but once I tie up a couple of wires that I've got cut right now, the entire system will require one lever pull, and the entire thing will run itself. But I figured it's a little bit more difficult to show and explain if I have the whole thing just running from start to finish every time I pull the lever, so I wanted to leave it kind of segmented here. This is something I've found myself doing as I learn how to wire in Terraria. I build small pieces and basically just wire it up so that I can manually operate it rather than relying on components of my circuit to do it for me, because it just introduces more complexity when you run into problems with this, which you inevitably will. I ran into a lot of problems building this circuit. So having manual control over the pieces that you build and testing each individual component on its own is, I've found, extremely important, and it makes a lot of sense too. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with the accumulators over here, and these 2 accumulators are divided up into 2 pairs. So you can see I've got the wood kind of carved out for each of them. And what these do, they're Boolean counters, so they just count in binary. And because I have 2 of these on each one, 2 bits gives you the ability to essentially count to 4, which, as it happens, is the maximum number of players on a team. And so, as you might be able to reason out here, the top one keeps track of the number of players who have been assigned to the red team, and the bottom one keeps track of the number of players assigned to the blue team. Alright, so we have the circuit over here broken out for our accumulators. So this is just a single team's color accumulator. And so I won't go through how counting in binary works exactly, because it's something that takes a little bit of time to explain. It's a little bit difficult to show. But I want you guys to kind of see how this works and be able to understand that it does do what I'm telling you it does. So this switch down here is the one that drives the counting mechanism, the accumulator. So the current state of things is consider that starting at 0. Nobody's assigned to this team. If I flip this switch once, that's me telling the circuit one person has been assigned to this team. You can see it changes state right here. If I flip this a second time, it's going to flip again. A third time for a third player, and finally a fourth time for a fourth player puts you right back at the start. And what this allows us to do is control, and maybe not control, but keep track of how many players have been assigned to each team. It's really important so that we don't go over 4 in this case for our 8-player arena. So that keeps track of the number there, but you might be kind of wondering how it actually plays into affecting this so that this doesn't necessarily stop a 4th player or a 5th player from being added to a team. So let's take a look at the actual randomizer circuit, and this is broken out over here. This is a duplicate of what you see here. There's a couple extraneous wires in the actual build. Like I said, we're going to operate this thing manually, and we want to I wanted to kind of clean this up so that you could see it a little bit more down to the basics or the essentials of it. So we'll start with these switches up here, and to make things a little bit easier, I'm going to dim the yellow wires. And the reason that I'm going to do that is because the yellow wires in these two components of the circuit are simply used to reset the system. They don't actually contribute to the build that we're talking about today as like logically. They're simply and exclusively used just to reset things back to default after everything's done. So pretend like the yellow wires don't exist. So now that we've seen the accumulator work, it's a fairly simple circuit, a pretty quick one to build and an easy one to understand, I think. Now this behemoth over here is, like I said, the brains of the operation. The reason that I wanted to split this video into 2 parts is I wanted to do this justice and actually go through and explain the sequence of how things happen. And so I'm going to go at a little bit of a slow pace if I can, just to explain all this, because there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that kind of loop back to itself. It's a little bit of a confusing diagram, and I want to make sure that I kind of outline things clearly on this. So the top 2 switches here are the ones that drive the mechanism. In order for this circuit to perform its job, which again, remember, is to choose either Team Red or Team Blue for each individual player, in order for this circuit to do its job, the green wire needs to be flipped, followed by the blue wire. So let's take a look at what those do. The green wire is wired to a faulty lamp that has one lit lamp underneath it and one unlit lamp. So we know from what I was showing earlier that there's a 50% chance that a signal will be fired out of this. So 50% of the time, this is going to fire a signal, and 50% of the time it's going to do absolutely nothing. So if we take a look at what that lamp is wired to, you can see it just runs across these 3 gates to its right, and then it also connects down here, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. But for right now, just take a look at how it runs across these 3 lamps. You can see it there. So when this switch gets flipped, there's a 50% chance it's going to flip those gates down there at the bottom, and you can see them kind of dancing around, and I'm flipping it on and off, and you can see sometimes when I flip it, it changes, other times it doesn't. And that's because, again, we have a 50% chance that this gate is actually even going to do anything at all. So once this has been flipped, that sets the randomization, and this switch here on the left that we were just looking at is what ultimately chooses red or blue. Simply that. Which you might be looking at this and saying, Jevons, why is there more? Why is there anything more than that? So let's take a look at what the rest of this does. So that sets these lamps, and so let me flip this back here real quick. So you can see the 3 lamps that are changing. Look only at the 2 to the left of the cluster of 3, so the 2 that are kind of in the middle here. So if the left lamp is lit up, the blue team is going to be the one that's chosen, and if the middle lamp here is the one that's lit up, the red team is going to be chosen. But we know from some of our previous wiring experiments and even some of the things we looked at in this video already that these faulty logic circuits don't do anything until you fire a circuit to them. So let's take a look at where the blue wire goes. And of course it comes down here and connects to those faulty logic gates. That's why we need to flip this one to randomize the team selection, and then blue to actually start the sequence. So taking a look at the sequence here, like I said, there's a lot to this, so bear with me. With the sequence here, you can see the blue and the green wires coming out of those 2 gates. Those are basically representative of red team and blue team. So we'll take a look at one of them, and it gives a pretty good illustration of what the other one does. So we'll follow the blue wire here. You can see it wraps around, it comes up and it lights up this gate. Remember this one for later, we'll talk about what this little delay circuit does at the end. The other side of this, there's a junction box right here, so it's going to go up, it junction boxes across these, and it lights up this lamp right here. Now this lamp, because it's lit up and it's an AND gate, is going to fire a signal out of the green wire. This green wire, if you look at our actual circuit, is what wires to the beginning of our accumulator. And so as you might expect, as the blue wire goes around, it's going to add one count to this top accumulator here, saying the blue team has added one player, essentially. And again, is that a slime staff? That's wonderful. All right. Hey. Oh, no, I don't want the money. There we go. All right, I got slime staff. Right in the middle of the video. It's good luck. So the blue wire comes all the way around here, lights this up, and like I said, it comes and adds that one player there. The other side of this, of course, is the green wire, and as you can see, it does the same thing. It just lights up a different one. It just lights up the one down here that's in the blue wire in our diagram. So this is the green wire that we're looking at that's coming out of the bottom of this gate. When we pull the second lever, that wire comes around, it fires, lights up this gate, and that blue wire you can see runs all the way around and adds one to the red team's count. Easy enough. So that covers how we keep track and how we add the count to the team. So just a quick recap. The green wire gets pulled, a 50-50 shot of switching the gates that are sitting here. The blue switch gets flipped shortly after, and we'll fire a signal out of either the blue or the green wire, looping us around back here, and ultimately adding the player count to the correct team. Remember I said to keep an eye on this area over here. So when this gate gets flipped, it's going to fire it's hard to see here, I've dimmed the yellow wires because they don't do anything but reset the system, so you don't need to worry about them. But you can see the red wire that comes out of here splits into two, and it goes into two different delays. One of them is a 3-second timer, and the other one's a 1-second timer. So when that gate gets flipped, when either one of the results is chosen, it's going to start this sequence through the red wire. Now, this diode right here is part of where I have the wire cut, and this 3-second timer, when the red wire fires, it's going to turn the timer on, but it's not actually going to fire out of the blue one yet. When the 3 seconds are up, it is going to fire out of that blue wire and come up here and basically loop around the system and pull the trigger to start that loop again. Now before that happens, since this is a 3-second timer, we've got the 1-second timer down here that's going to basically fire its signal first. So again, the red wire lights up the lamp and turns on the timer. So when we actually do this, you're going to see both timers light up at the same time. The 1-second timer is going to turn off first and fire a signal all the way up here. And you can see I left a junction box here. This would normally be a green wire. This is that wire snip that I put in just so that you guys can kind of see what's going on here without this system looping around on itself. So when the 1-second timer goes off, it's going to loop all the way around here and it's going to fire that randomizer again. And then of course 2 seconds later, when the other timer turns itself off, that blue wire is going to fire the actual activation lever. The other area that this wiring system goes to, you can see on the green wire, the signal is pushed through this. It's basically a wire change because I needed a yellow wire added to the end here. It's hard to see, but there's a yellow wire on this one. That leads out to the memory module, and we'll cover what that wire connects to in the next video. So I want to show how this circuit randomizes and how it actually works, but it's a little bit dark right now, so I'm going to wait till morning here really quick. Alright, so it's morning time here, and I kind of went over the basics of how this circuit works. So I hope I've explained it well enough. I know this is a really confusing one to explain, but I hope I've done a good enough job, and I hope seeing it in action will kind of help out, help your understanding to see what it is that it's actually doing. So remember again, the left switch just simply randomizes the choice of team with no regard to how many people have been on either team, at least in its current state. So we can flip this multiple times and it'll choose whatever team it decides to choose. When we pull this, that's what's actually going to activate the circuit. You can see this lamp here lit up telling us that the red team was selected, which is going to lead to our accumulators. You saw the timers there light up. I'll pull it again just so that you can see them. The 1 second one goes off first and re-randomizes, and the 3 second timer will pull the actual activation mechanism, firing the loop once again. Again, I have those wires cut on these. That's why it's not actually looping. I'll show that one more time. So the green wire's cut there, and the blue wire's cut right there. So that's pretty easy, I hope, for that particular piece of just activation and kind of that little bit of loop back to fire those two essential mechanisms to make this work. Again, those two mechanisms are represented by these two switches. First is the randomizer, and the second is the actual activation. So the challenge, like I had mentioned at the beginning of the video with this, is making sure that there are 4 players on each team every time. And I played with different ideas on how to do this, and what we came up with was the accumulator method that has these just 2 counters. But what happens when the accumulators actually do reach 4 that causes this to resolve that problem? I've wired up a couple switches here that would normally be wired to the final gate in the accumulator, which is what will fire a signal once the count of 4 has been reached. And so to simulate this, I've actually wired a couple of these switches here so that we can test it and see it. But I want to take a look here visually and kind of trace it down so that we can get an idea of what it's going to do at the start. So this one here that starts with the green wire is going to light up this lamp and fire a signal from this AND gate. You can see that's going to set the status of this gate to on. The other side of the blue wire will go up here and actually flip the lamp that's inside of our randomizer gate. So what that does, and what this is telling us, is whatever, I'll be honest, I don't know whether, in most of this circuit, I don't know whether on is red team, or on is blue team, or off is red team, off is blue team. I'm not sure which is which. It doesn't actually really matter until the very end of the circuit, when you get down to the point where you're firing the lamps. But for the sake of this, what it's going to do is it's going to toggle off one of the choices for the randomizer. And by doing that, we'll go ahead and flip this. You can see both of the randomizer gates are off, which means I can sit here and flip this gate till my heart's content, and it's never going to fire a signal because there's no chance that it's going to choose a gate that's on. So go ahead and put that circuit back. The other side of it does the exact same thing. It just leads to the other gate in the randomizer. You can see it also climbs up into the lamp on this gate right here, just like the blue one did, and I'll talk about what those do in a second because they're really easy. But let's go ahead and test this one by flipping this on. Now both lamps are on, meaning every time I flip the switch, it's going to change. And so what that does is, because the circuit resets itself afterwards, after the player's been assigned to a team, what this does is it forces the hand of this entire mechanism to choose one team or another. So once our accumulator has reached the point where it's made the full circuit of 4 and fires that final signal out, it's going to force that randomizer gate to choose the other team for the remaining players. And that's the way I was able to solve the problem of sometimes having 5 players against 3 players, or sometimes having... I even had one before I had this piece built in that 1 player got assigned to red team and the other 7 were chosen as blue. So this is my method of being able to rectify that. It simply just keeps track of each of the team counts, and once one of the teams gets full, it just forces the hand of that randomizer to choose the other team for the remaining players in the circuit. Now I want to talk about these 2 little gates over here because we've kind of went through everything else. I think I mentioned it briefly, but these up here just run into the memory module. You can see they run across the top here, and in the second video we'll talk a little bit more about what that actually does in relation to the memory unit. But the rest of this we've covered pretty much in detail, with the exception of these 2 little gates. And I said they're pretty easy to understand. All they do, like we said, they get They get turned on once one of the teams fills up. So each one corresponds to a team. And what this does, let's say the red team is full, and we force the rest of the players to be blue team by turning both lamps off. What happens with this, because we need this circuit to reset after each one, or it'd be nice for it to, we have this switch up here wired to our reset circuit. Now, like I said, the yellow wire's been turned off, but I'm going to turn it on now, and I'll actually dim the others. There we go. All right, so you can see the yellow wire fires the faulty gates on both of these at the same time. And you'll notice because the wires cross the gate, the actual AND gate itself, the one that's turned blue, it's going to fire that signal back out into the blue or the green wire, depending on which one's lit up. So this side over here just touches a gate, so it doesn't actually do anything in this direction. It only does something when this switch is pulled. So if you look over to the right, that's where it lines up to the randomizer. And so as you might have guessed, this just simply resets the randomizer. Regardless of whatever state you leave these in, you can flip them completely backwards and it'll reset. And so that's all these do, is they're just there to reset the entire randomizer to make sure things don't fall out of whack to the point where both teams have slots available, but the randomizer is forced to choose like red team or something like that because the wires got tripped in a weird way. This circuit just makes sure everything goes back to the way that it was. Alright, so let's take a look at this thing in action. Like I said, we're going to cover the memory module in a bonus episode that's going to come out tomorrow. There's just too much to fit into one video for this system. I was trying to do stuff that was a little bit simpler, but I thought this was a really cool project and really cool, fairly easy to understand, unique kind of build. So what I want to do is I want to run this thing manually. Like I said, I have it wired up to switches. Those switches will turn into just loops and essentially automated process. So this entire thing is started by one lever pull. The entire thing selects all 8 players, fires the teleporters, all that good stuff, all in one shot. So let's go ahead and take a look here at what my switches do. The switch here on the left is a reset, so we're not going to be using that one much. This one here is going to fire that randomizer that we were looking at. And this switch here, just due to the wire colors getting in the way here, I had to run 2 different colored wires here so that they wouldn't catch the green and the yellow on opposite sides. But this is what actually activates the, like I said, kind of that brain, the CPU there. You can ignore the stuff down here. It's just a copy of this circuit for some other stuff here. This switch right here is part of the memory module, and once we've selected all the teams for all 8 players, we're going to pull this lever to basically set a second row of gates, and then we'll pull this switch over here on the end, at the end, to light up our bulbs down at the bottom there. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. So we're going to pull the randomizer, see it flipped it, pull the lever, and that's going to lock in player 1. So we're going to do that again. Pull it for player 2, randomize, pull for player 3, and you can see it counting along here. We're now about to pull for player 4, so we're going to pull, set it in, and that's going to set us to the 5th player. We're going to pull and lock it in. This is number 6. Now you can see here one of our teams was filled up, so it forced that randomizer to shut both of its gates off. Which means there's no longer space on whatever team corresponds to the top one here. So what that means is every pull after this is basically going to do absolutely nothing. So we're going to pull this again. And we can randomize all we want, but it's not going to do anything. So we are going to pull it one more go to lock in the final player. So now that we have all 8 players selected, our next step is to actually kind of lock this in and get the bulbs set up. So you can see this row down here is all off, and same with this one. So I'll explain the memory video what these do, but you can see when I pull that lever, it just kind of trickles them down. And then finally, we're going to pull the magic lever that makes the entire thing light up and kind of gives us our visual display. And as you can see, this system does in fact randomly select 4 players for each of the teams. And what this is going to let us do is it's going to let us choose which teleporters to send each player to. So I'm going to wire up some nice looking delays and things like that to make the system look kind of cool and feel kind of cool while it's doing the randomization, or the randomizing. So I'm going to wire this thing up to some teleporters to basically choose which team teleporter to send each player to, whether it's send them to the red base or the blue base, depending on which team they're on. And it's a fairly easy system to set up. Like, we just have the red and the blue wires here, and they correspond to the team colors, which makes it really easy at this end to kind of see what's happening and see who's going to be on what team. So that's going to do it for today. Like I said, keep your eyes out for the bonus video tomorrow that's going to cover the memory circuit in detail and explain why these things are in here, what they're doing. And we'll also have the final copy of the world that's going to allow us to actually test the teleporters, which is going to be pretty cool. All of this manual switch flipping is going to be automated, and so that'll be pretty nice. It should be out tomorrow. It may be Friday, but I'll do my best to get it out tomorrow for you guys, so you can kind of keep an eye on all this and see the rest of this build. I'm going to put a guide up on the TMech forums as well, and probably on Reddit. Just so that everybody can see this and potentially use it in their multiplayer bases. So for right now, I hope this has been helpful. If you guys have any questions in the meantime, feel free to ask them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Wednesday Wires. But for now, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Good to have early. Oh, the ice. Oh, the dart traps. Oh no. That legitimately scared me. I jumped when those things fired. Oh my gosh, am I gonna die from this? I hope not.